authority over political life, often using coercion and propaganda to maintain control. In simpler terms, it's a system where power flows from the top down, not the bottom up. Unlike democracy, where legitimacy comes from elections and consent, authoritarian regimes draw legitimacy from tradition, ideology, military strength, or fear. Magstadt reminds us that authoritarianism isn't one-size-fits-all. It appears in different forms, from military juntas to personal dictatorships, from monarchies to single-party states. Let's quickly walk through a few key terms that the textbook defines. Autocracy, rule by one person who holds unlimited political power. Oligarchy, rule by a few, often from the elite or wealthy class. Theocracy, rule by religious leaders claiming divine authority. Junta, a government led by military officers who have seized power. Coup d'état, a sudden overthrow of government, usually by the military. Totalitarianism, an extreme form of authoritarianism where the state seeks total control over all aspects of life, including thought, culture, and belief. Magstadt explains that while all totalitarian regimes are authoritarian, not all authoritarian regimes are totalitarian. Totalitarian systems, like Nazi Germany or Stalin's Soviet Union, rely not just on obedience but on the total transformation of society. Here's where the myth comes in. Many authoritarian regimes claim to act in the name of order, security, or progress. Leaders justify centralized power by arguing that democracy is too chaotic, too slow, or too weak to handle crises. We've heard the phrase before, we need a strong leader. Magstadt calls this the myth of the benevolent dictator, the belief that a single powerful ruler can solve problems better than democratic institutions can. History shows that once leaders gain unchecked power, they rarely use it just for the people's benefit. For example, Augusto Pinochet's Chile claimed to restore order after chaos, but it came at the cost of thousands of lives and decades of repression. Or consider China under Xi Jinping, where central control is justified by national unity, but dissenters, journalists, and activists face censorship and surveillance. In theory, authoritarianism promises efficiency. In reality, it trades freedom for control. Magstadt identifies several key tools that authoritarian leaders use to maintain control. First is coercion, which involves using the threat or reality of violence to suppress opposition. Think of secret police, disappearances, and surveillance states. Second is propaganda, involves controlling media and narratives to shape how people think. The regime becomes the storyteller, and truth becomes flexible. Third is control of institutions. Courts, schools, and parliaments are often symbolic, existing only to legitimize the ruler's will. Fourth is patronage and corruption. Loyalty is bought, not earned. Those who support the regime are rewarded. Critics are punished. Fifth is fear and ideology. Fear keeps people silent, and ideology keeps them loyal. Together, they build a political culture of dependence. This structure creates what Magstadt calls a culture of obedience, where people internalize the idea that questioning authority is dangerous or even immoral. Now, let's bring this into the present. In Authoritarianism Here, Michael Lind, 2022, argues that authoritarianism isn't confined to dictatorships. It can exist, quietly, even within democratic systems. He writes that authoritarian tendencies emerge not only from strong men, but also from technocrats, corporations, and unelected bureaucracies that limit popular control. That's a chilling reminder. Authoritarianism isn't always about tanks in the streets. Sometimes it's about control through policy, regulation, or narrative, all under the banner of stableite. Why? This blurring of lines between democracy and control is part of the myth Magstadt talks about. In some cases, people willingly accept limits on freedom if they believe it will protect them from chaos. That's what makes authoritarianism so enduring. It doesn't always need violence. Sometimes, it just needs fear and fatigue. Let's look at some examples that illustrate how authoritarian systems actually function, beyond the myth. China, the party as the state. Magstadt points to China as a model of institutional authoritarianism, where a single party, the Chinese Communist Party (CCP), claims to represent the people but in reality controls them. The CCP uses what Magstadt calls a hybrid model of modern autocracy, blending economic liberalization with tight political control. Under Xi Jinping, China has built a digital surveillance state, facial recognition, online censorship, and a social credit system that rates citizens' behavior. Freedom House ranks China near the bottom globally in political rights, noting how the party uses technology to ensure obedience. Here, power is not only centralized, it's personalized. The second case is that of Iran, theocracy in practice. C. Iran represents another variation, theocratic authoritarianism. Here, political power is justified by religious authority. The supreme leader holds ultimate power, overseeing both government and military. Magstadt defines this as a dual system, part religious, part political, but ultimately unified under divine law. Critics, journalists, and reformers face imprisonment or worse. The 2022 protests following the death of Mahsa Amini reminded the world that even divine legitimacy can't silence calls for freedom forever. The next case is Russia, managed democracy. Russia, as Magstadt explains, represents personalist authoritarianism, a system where institutions exist but serve one leader's power. Vladimir Putin's rule is a masterclass in control through image, patronage, and propaganda. Elections happen, but they're orchestrated. Opposition exists, but only symbolically. Independent media has been stifled, and dissent is equated with treason. The 2022 invasion of Ukraine reinforced what Magstadt calls the myth of restoration, where authoritarian leaders justify aggression as reclaiming lost national greatness. The final case is North Korea, totalitarianism reimagined. North Korea shows the extreme, totalitarianism, where state control penetrates every aspect of life. Magstadt defines it as a political system that seeks to transform human nature itself through ideology, surveillance, and terror. Here, personality cults replace politics, and fear replaces faith. Citizens are taught to worship the leader, not question him. So, if authoritarian systems suppress freedom, why do they persist? Magstadt offers one clear answer: efficiency and fear. People often tolerate control if it means stability. When economies grow or crime decreases, citizens may accept repression as the necessary price of peace. Lind, 2022, adds another dimension. Modern authoritarianism hides behind technocracy and expert governance. He argues that as institutions grow more complex, real decision-making shifts away from the public. That's how democratic societies risk becoming soft authoritarian, when people stop participating because they feel their voices don't matter. This creates what both Magstadt and Lind describe as the paradox of modern governance. People fear chaos more than they value freedom, so they surrender power voluntarily. To understand the myth and the reality, we need to confront a difficult truth. Authoritarianism often wears the mask of democracy. Elections still happen. Constitutions still exist. But beneath the surface, they are hollow. Political scientists call this authoritarian resilience. It's the ability of authoritarian systems to adapt just enough to survive, using reforms, fake opposition, or partial freedoms to maintain legitimacy. China calls it socialism with Chinese characteristics. Russia calls it sovereign democracy. Iran calls it Islamic democracy. Why? But as Magstadt reminds us, these are just different ways of saying the same thing: power without accountability. The real danger of authoritarianism is not just political, it's psychological. When people are taught to obey, they eventually forget how to question. That's why authoritarian systems are hardest to defeat from within. They don't just silence the opposition, they reshape the mind. This is what Magstadt calls the totalitarian impulse, the state's drive to control not just what people do, but what they believe. And yet, history also shows us something powerful. Authoritarian systems eventually collapse under their own weight. From the fall of the Berlin Wall to the Arab Spring, ordinary people have shown that even the strongest regimes are fragile when truth and hope re-emerge. So, what's the takeaway? Authoritarianism isn't just a relic of the past, it's a warning for the present. It's not always obvious, and it doesn't always come with military uniforms or cults of personality. Sometimes, it comes quietly, through bureaucracy, complacency, and control of information. As Magstadt concludes, the essence of authoritarian rule lies not in its form, but in its function, the concentration of power without accountability. That's why studying authoritarianism isn't about condemning others. It's about recognizing how easily societies, even democratic ones, can slip toward control. If this video helped you understand how power works and how easily it can be abused, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Learning politics isn't about memorizing systems, it's about understanding people. Don't forget to learn, think, and engage. Signing off. Yours in learning.